Sounds good. Okay, now do you want to send your message to Shira?
Shira, when you see this, we miss you. Come back, and we're looking forward to having you back in the shiur. I'm sure you'll be back soon.
And Mazel Tov.
And Mazel Tov, Mazel Tov, Mazel Tov for your first grandbaby. Join the club. It's the best.
Aviva.
All right. Parsha Chayei. Yes.
Aviva, I left you a message because I couldn't get in, but I am in now.
Oh, wonderful. And I'm sorry. And I was keeping my other people and didn't see the
You don't have to return the message.
Okay. Parsha Chayei. So
everybody should mute themselves.
Yes, please. Parsha Chayei, I feel like it's a bit of a breather. It's not one of these parashiyot in Sefer Bereshit where we have 8 different stories that we want to get to. There's the episode in the beginning of the parsha where Avram purchases Marat HaMachpelah and
I don't hear you.
Because Hillary muted me.
I muted you, but I'm really sorry.
That's okay. So we have Sarah's death and the purchase of Marat HaMachpelah in the beginning of the parsha. And then the entire rest of the parsha, if you're looking in a Tanakh that's laid out, the Masoretic text with the parshiyot stumot and ptuchot and the line breaks, you'll notice that from Perek Kaf Daled, from the beginning of Sheni, through pretty much the end of the parsha, until Shishi and Shvi are very short, is one long parsha. It's one uninterrupted unit of text. There are no breaks, and just to reiterate a point, the prakim that we use are a Christian division of Tanakh, but the actual line breaks, the breaks that are stumot, right? You have a break in the middle of a line and then the pasuk resumes, or the ptuchot where it breaks at the end of a line and then the space goes all the way to the end. Those are Masoretic breaks in the text. That's the Masorah of how we actually divide the psukim into units. And so the prakim sometimes line up with that, sometimes they don't, and prakim have just become convention in our break it down of Tanakh. But looking at the parshiyot is really important, especially when you have in the printing of the big Koran Tanakh 1, 2, 3, 4 pages of print without any breaks. It's one long story, it's one long unit, and I want to look at one element of it today. So today's share is going to be a lot more pshat based and less and fewer mefarshim, because I want to try to zoom out on this story that we are familiar with, and that we can always try to learn a new layer, learn a new message from when we examine it once again. So it's the story of Evet Avraham and Rivka. Rivka enters the scene in this week's parsha, and we're introduced in the beginning of this parshiya, which is Perek Kaf Daled, and it's the middle of Sheni in the Aliyot. Avraham zaken ba bayamim. I'm going to share the screen in a little while, but I like to see everybody, and now I'm just in the psukim. So Avraham zaken ba bayamim v'Adonai berach et Avraham bakol. Okay, so it's the end of Avraham's life, or toward the end of his life. He's now widowed. He has overcome all of the challenges and tribulations and tests of his life, climaxing in the Akedah, and now has buried his wife in a very mechubad way, and he's just blessed. And now it's time to marry off his son. Now, you know better than me where marrying off your children falls in the timeline of your life. It seems a little late, but here we are, and he's now turning to the task of marrying off his son. His son Yitzchak. Ishmael was married off by his mother years before, and Yitzchak has remained unmarried this entire time, which maybe we can even pause and ask that. Like, I don't know. Why didn't Sarah ever want to become involved in finding Yitzchak a wife? Why only now? But it seems like Avram was waiting for something, waiting to be really old or just done with everything else And this is the one piece of unfinished business, it seems, to find a wife for Yitzchak, and he charges his avdo zakan beito, his eved, the chief of his house, his right hand man, his chief of staff, so to speak, and he makes him swear to go to Aram Naharaim, not to bring Yitzchak, to find a girl from his family, etc., etc. And the classic understanding of who this is. Can they unmute, Hillary? No. Can people unmute themselves?
I think so.
I can read lips.
Yeah.
Eliezer. Eliezer, except it doesn't say the name Eliezer here anywhere. All right, Eliezer came up a couple of times in previous parashiot. He came up when Avram asked Hashem, I don't have any descendants. How are you promising me a great family, a nation, and land? And Eliezer is all I have. He comes up midrashically in the war against the 4 and 5 kings, that perhaps Eliezer was the one who went and fought. Pshat is that he sent an army full of people. But here we have Avdoz Kan Beito, right? We have the Eved, who is the head of his house. And so the midrashic explanation again is that this is Eliezer, that there's one, we've already met him, we know his name. The midrash is always happy to conserve characters, and if we've met somebody before, then somebody unnamed appears in the text, then we can link them together and say it's the same person. But I want to look at the text today for what it says, because it doesn't say Eliezer. Eliezer, we can assume is old, right? Hold on. Cookie just wrote in the chat that he couldn't marry Yitzchak off because his wife wasn't born yet. There are no possible prospects for him until then. So that could definitely be the case. If they were waiting, and perhaps even Sarah agreed, until there's somebody born to Nahor's family, to Avram's cousin side of the family, in order to have a wife for Yitzchak. That's very, very possible. And like I said, we've met Eliezer, but he's old, meaning if he was Avram's right-hand man back in the day, so he's not young. And there's a journey involved here, and there's leading a caravan of camels and a lot of schlepping and a lot of, so Avram's not going himself, perhaps because of age, perhaps because of kavod, but we can ask ourselves, right? Like, who might you send on a mission like this? What type of person, in terms of trust and in terms of, logistical and physical capabilities, who might you send? Maybe someone old, maybe not. But one thing is for sure is that it doesn't say, and in this entire parsha, he is never referred to by a name. This person is referred to by 2 different words, and that we'll see in the text. So did someone have a question?
You said the Torah wants to conserve, what was the word you used? Characters. Did you mean characters as in otiot? Or
no,
because that's
no,
word that's used also.
No. I meant the midrash often wants to conserve characters as in muyot, as in people, right? So at the end of the parsha, where it says Avram took another wife and her name was Keturah, so the midrash says that's Hagar. Shifra and Puah are Yocheved and Miriam, etc. Or unnamed people are associated with characters who we've seen. There's 2 ways to do it. There's sometimes there are different people with different names, and the midrash says they're the same person. It happens in Megillat, in the midrash on Esther a bunch of times. Or you can have an unnamed person that the midrash says, oh, that's someone else, that's Eliezer, or whatever it is. But it doesn't say Eliezer. It says that he at the beginning of the parsha. Yeah.
Why are we so sure that Eliezer is old? Like, what do we have to go on about his age?
Only that he
It
was
says
already.
Zaken Beito. It says Zaken.
Well, Zakan Beito here could mean that he's important and influential. But if Eliezer was already his, let's say, chief of staff back, 30 years ago, when he was 70 and coming to Eretz Canaan. So then, I don't know, I assume it's assumption, you're right, it's an assumption, but he was already old enough to be established, and now he's 30 years older or more. He's more than 30 years older, because now this is Sarah's death. So she was 127, so Avram's 137. So it's, it's many years into everybody's life. He's not,
Okay.
presumably he's not 40, he's more advanced age than that. So here in the first section where Avram is speaking to him, I'll read it quickly without translating, because the translation is less important, and notice how he's referred to. So Vayomer Avraham el Avdo Zkan Beito Hamosha B'chol Asher Lo, and then he says, take a swear, and then Vayomer Elav Ha'eved Ulai Lo Toveh Ha'isha Lelechet Acharei La'aretz Hazot Hashev Ashiv Et Bincha La'aretz Asher Yatzat Misham. The Eved says, what if she doesn't want to go with me? And Avram answers. And then in Pasuk Tet, Vayasem ha'eved et yado tachad yerech Avraham adunav vayishav lo ala davar hazeh. He's the Eved. He puts his hand under his thigh. That's the symbol of an oath. He swears. Vayikach ha'eved asara gmalim migmalei adonav vayelech v'chol tuvav adonav biyado vayakom vayelech el aram naraim el ir nachor. Every single time he's referred to as an Eved, he is the servant, and Avraham is either referred to by name or Adonav, his master. So it's very clear here that this is a servant. This is help, right? This is somebody who is serving Avraham, and isn't called by name, but is called by his title. Okay, and he sets out on his way. He sets out on his way with all of the wealth. He's got 10 camels. The Midrash says they had special markings of Avraham, that they had, whether that's like jewelry or special straps or fabric. And we know that he has jewelry with him because he gives it to Rivka later on. And then this Eved speaks. And we get to hear that he really is Yirei Shamayim, and he's clearly positively influenced by Avraham, and he davens to Hashem, and he really calls out and asks Hashem for help. Vayomar Adonai Elohei Adoni Avraham, Akrena lefanai hayom v'aseh chesed im Adoni Avraham. Hashem, you're the God of my master Avram. Do chesed with him, answer him with chesed. And then he makes his kind of deal with Hashem, or he makes his sign. I'm going to go to the water. That's where shidduchim are made in Tanakh. They're made at the well. I will go to the water source. Uvnot anshe ha'ir yotzot lish'ov mayim. The women of the city will go out. They'll go out to draw water. V'ayah ha'na'ara asher amar eleha hatina kadech ve'eshteh. ואמרה שתי וגם גמליך אשקה, אותה הוכחת לעבדך ליצחק, ובה עדה כי עשית חסד עם אדוני. So that was a long pasuk, but he says, the girl who comes out, and when I ask her for water, she not only gives me water, but offers to water the camels as well. That will be proof for Yitzchak, okay? Na'avdecha Yitzchak, and that's also how I'll know that you did chesed with my master, with Abraham. So he's always relative to Avram and his family, right? He's davening to Hashem for Hatzlacha, but so that Yitzchak can get a wife, and so that Avraham can have Hashem's chesed bestowed on him. Okay, so that until then he's by himself, or he's with all his caravan. Then is it okay that I don't have the text on the screen? What do you prefer? You prefer a
Most
sefer?
of us have the text, I think.
Okay, I prefer reading from a sefer and seeing you, but if it's very difficult for people, then I can share the screen also. Wonderful. Okay. So now I'm in Pasuk Vav. And now Rivka comes onto the scene. I'm going to ignore for a moment not ignore, but I don't understand the Midrash that says she was 3, because I don't understand how the pshat makes sense if she was 3. So for the sake of the shir, I will ask for the forgiveness of my midrashic devotees, because I don't understand the pshat according to that midrash. I'm sure there's something to it, and there's a depth that I'm missing, but I don't understand the pshat of she 3, so I'm just going to pretend that she's a teenager, or I'm going to understand that she's a teenager, because that seems to be what's implied by the language. Okay, so Vayhihu terem kila ledaber. So when he finishes speaking, and there it's the pronoun who. He's not called the Eved explicitly in that pasuk, but he's referred to by the pronoun. We, the reader, have already been introduced to this girl Rivka, who was born to Betuel, the son of Milcah, the sister of Nahor, the brother of Abraham. So now they're cousins, basically. So we've been introduced to her. She enters the scene. The Eved doesn't necessarily know who she is, but she's called by name for us, the reader. And she comes with her water, with her pitcher, so she is called a Na'ara, which actually does seem to imply that she is around age 12, and that she's an eligible bachelorette. She has never been married. She's a Betula. She's of marriageable age, so she's beautiful. Like she seems like a very good shidduch prospect for everybody, not just for this stranger who's coming to the well. And she fills her water. Vayarot ha'eved likrata. Okay, so the Eved runs to greet her. Vayomer. May I have a little bit of water, right? He's clearly been traveling. She's drawn water already. He asks her for a bit. Vatomer shtei adoni. Okay, and she calls him Adoni, my master, which means sir, right? Here, sir, please drink. Vatimaher vator kadal yada vatashkehu. She feeds him. She gives him water very quickly. Vatachalash goto. She finishes giving him water, and then she says, "Vatomer gam ligmalacha eshavim adim kilu lishtot." Exactly what he asked Hashem to send him a sign. She does. She offers to feed the camels. Vatimaher vatar kadal hashoket. Which I once read someone who understands these things and like described what a tremendous amount of water that is and how much time that probably took and how much physical strength that took. Like no pashut to offer someone and his 10 camels water. That's not like, here's a glass of water and a chad pami. Like this was a big deal. And then we have an interesting switch in the language, because then it says v'ha'ish mishta'ela macharish ladat atzliach Adonai darko imlo. Suddenly, this person who's been called an Eved the entire time is called an Ish. Okay, and it's a little bit curious because Ish is a very anonymous name, right? He was clearly a stranger there, but also Ish versus Eved it's a status jump, right? He went from servant to independent person. Okay, and he's standing and waiting. Vayhi kasher kilu hagmalim lishtot vayikach ha'ish nezem zahav beka mishkala u'shnei tzmidim al yadeha asara zahav mishkalam. The ish takes all this jewelry, this very valuable jewelry, out of his sack or whatever it was. Okay, he takes it out. It's unclear whether he gave it to her then or gives it to her after, but he takes it out. He's holding it. He's now an ish, holding a lot of money. Vayomer bat mi'at hagidi nali ayesh beit avich makom lanu lalin. Who are you? Whose daughter are you? He needs to double check. He's got the sign from Hashem, but he needs to make sure that she's actually from the right family and that what Hashem seems to be telling him is true. And he says, do you have a place for us to stay? And if the genealogical information that we got previously in Pasuk Ted Vav, she now says explicitly to the Ish who's standing before her. And we have plenty of place to put you up. We have food for your camels. And the Ish bows before Hashem. And he calls out, Bayomer Baruch Adonai Elohei Adoni Abraham Asher lo azav chasto v'amito me'im Adoni Anochi baderach nachani Adonai Beit Achei Adoni. And he thanks Hashem publicly in front of her and says, Baruch Hashem, the God of Abraham, who sent me in the right direction, and gave him the sign and also sent the right girl. Okay, so
Can I
just to
say
recap,
something?
yeah.
Okay, something just hit me.
Mhm.
Yonatan Razel has a song about when Yosef is looking for his brothers and he meets up with an Ish and he says, Hagidan ali efohem ro'im. And
Mhm.
he an Ish and it says, Hagidin ali. It's the same Lashon
Mhm.
and it's also Ish. I just wonder if there's any kind of connection.
It's interesting because you could take that one of the Ish that Yosef meets, right? I would say that that's really fascinating. I've never thought of that before. The pshat there is that it's someone who knows, like a native, right? Because otherwise, why would you ask him for directions? And the Midrash says it's a malach, right? That's why he's there. Also, Vayavek
it's the same
Ishimo, when
lashon
Yaakov
of
struggles with
Hagid-
the angel, he's also called an Ish. Ish is an
But
interesting
there are
word.
two different things, that the Ish and the Hagidin Ali, which is shown in both, and it just
Interesting. Okay,
very
good. So noted. Cool. And so he continues to be the Ish, right? Right? She goes and tells her family what happened. Lavan now enters the scene. Lavan el ha'ish achutza el ha'ayin. And Lavan goes out to meet the Ish. Okay? And then vayikirot et hanezem et atzmidim al yedei achoto ukesham'o et divrei Rivka achoto lemor ko diber elai ha'ish. Right? When he sees the jewelry and hears what Rivka has to say about the Ish, vayavo el ha'ish. He goes up to him, he sees him with all the camels, he sees him with all the jewelry. Rivka's calling him an Ish. Come, join us. The Ish goes into the house. We now learn that he's got an entourage. He's given food for the camels. He's offered at the place to clean up, and that all his entourage can wash up also. And he refuses to eat until he tells his whole story. And how does this story open? Vayomar Eved Avraham Anochi. I'm not an Ish. I am Eved Avraham. Okay, the entire prologue to the story, the whole back in Elonim Mamre in Chevron, where Avraham is, he's Eved Avraham. The whole way when he's talking to Hashem, he's talking about Adoni Avraham, my master, and I'm the Eved. Rivka meets him. Suddenly he switches to an Ish, and now he gets to Beit Lavan and declares, "I am Eved Avraham. Make no mistake about it." Okay, so what's going on here? Like, why does the text change his title in the middle and then switch back? And there's more, like there's more switching. Thoughts?
Would you welcome a stranded Eved into your home if he, somebody who was in rags, somebody who didn't look good, who's been journeying for days, who's a stranger?
Okay.
Or would you welcome into your home an Ish, somebody of importance, somebody who has, sorry, he may have had to have shifted his presentation almost, his representation to become an Ish, and only legalot after that he's Eved Avraham.
So putting aside the question of would you welcome, who would you welcome in, we clear that he was not ragged looking, exactly like you wrote. He did not show up in Shmatas. He showed up with a caravan of camels, an entourage of people, and a lot of money and jewelry. Right? He did
but it
not
sounds
look
like Aladdin. It sounds like the story of Aladdin.
Which my kids are
He
now
could dress
obsessed
up in
with,
all
and
the
I'm
clothes.
like, they all know the words to the song and they sing it all the time. But yes, exactly. You picture Aladdin. I have other Tanakh stories that I compare that to, though. I think that when Adoniyahu wanted to crown himself, when David was sick, I imagine that Aladdin parade, that's what Adoniyahu marched through, and then Shlomo had to stop him. But that's neither here nor there. But yes, he comes with camels.
But isn't it the text, the Chumash that changes between man and servant? It's not really Eliezer who calls himself a man.
Correct. It is the text, because I think when in the context of Abraham, the text is clearly emphasizing that he's an Eved relative to Abraham. But what we learn about his appearances is that he is perceived as an Ish, not just because Tanakh is calling him an Ish, but also because of what he actually looks like and how he's presenting himself and what he has around him. And so it's not just Tanakh telling you and me, post Matan Torah, that he appeared as an Ish, but what did Rivka see? Rivka saw an Ish. The man who came to the well with an entourage and a caravan and jewelry didn't show up in Shmatas and didn't say to her at any point, I'm Eved Avraham. Did you notice that? He asked who she or her family was, and he said, Baruch Hashem for, Adoni Avraham, which, by the way, Avraham was everyone's Adon in that place, right? Hashem, the God of Abraham, that wouldn't necessarily mean that he's his Eved. And so
He also
up until this
represents-
point, Rivka sees an Ish, a really prominent, wealthy, influential, possibly individual. So does Lavan. Lavan picks up on the money and the camels and the people right away. And seems to invite him in because of that, like Tanya was saying. And then only once he starts telling his story, he says, I'm not hiding anything. I am Eved Avraham.
Can I say
He
something?
was representing Avraham Avinu. So he was representing nobility. He was representing God. He needed to be an Ish. And then when he presented himself here, I think, wasn't it because of modesty? Vayomer Eved Avraham Anochi. I'm really just not an appendage, but I'm
Emissary.
It's a humble presentation.
I think that there's some spirituality going on here. This guy wasn't just an Ish, He was almost a Navi, if you want. He was from Avram's house. He was already part of Avram's religion. And he talked straight to Hashem. He said, listen, I'm going to do a test. Yeah. And the test works 100%. Can we say that? No, only a Navi can work, or somebody very spiritual can do something like that and get away with it. Okay, he had Avram the bargainer who was ahead of him. But he was a special man. I think Rivka saw that. I'm sure Rivka saw that. We know that Avram was considering making him his Yoresh if he hadn't had kids. So he wasn't just your simple Ish, and he wasn't just a servant. Whatever.
No, not just that. He was also privy to at least, miracle. There was Kvitzat Derech, right?
Right.
I think it's also talking about Eliezer's character. Other people see him as the Ish, but he identifies himself verbally as an Eved.
Right. And doesn't want anybody to misconstrue the situation. Right.
The people who call Ish are the ones who see him and they say it.
Right. Where Devorah, I saw that the camera's not on, but he wanted to say something before? Where did Devorah go? No? Oh, never mind. Did she get bumped off? I thought, okay, if Devorah comes back in, I'm pretty sure she wanted to say something before. Okay. So now, without reading the entire, telling over of the story, we'll just know, because then we'll run out of time before getting to the end. But he goes through the whole story. He goes through the whole story, and like Ruthie was saying, that like this is him saying, make no mistake, I'm not operating alone. Like Hillary said, perhaps out of Nevuah or Tzlichut of Avram. A lot of people said this. Sorry, I've lost track. You also wrote in the chat that I'm a shaliach of Avram. I'm here because of him. Hashem answered me, and by answering me, he answered Abraham. But doesn't he mention it all?
He doesn't mention Yitzchak yet.
Right. Right. He doesn't mention Yitzchak. He says that Avram sent him lo tikach isha livni mibnot Knaani, but rather go to take lakachta isha livni. But he doesn't mention Yitzchak by name. He's very focused on Abraham, and he goes through the whole story. And at the end, Lavan and Betuel say, I'm on Pasuk Nun. Right? They recognize that this is a godly mission. And they say, okay, so they say, take Rivka.
Amazing.
Just a little curved, more curved.
And then Vayhi kasher shama Eved Avraham et Divrehem vayishtachu arta l'Adonai. Again, he's called by the Torah an Eved, right? Not just calling himself, but the Torah calls him an Eved. And then Vayotzei Eved klei chesed u'klei zahav u'bgadim vayiten l'Rivka umigdanot natan la'achi u'le'ima. And then they ate. He gives her the jewelry. And they sit and eat. Okay, and then is the curious request of Achiha ve'ima, of Lavan and her mother, that maybe she should stay here for a little longer. And he says, no, al tachru oti v'Adonai tzliach tarki shlachuni me'elcha la'adoni. And then Pasuk Nun Zayid vayamru nikra la'na'ara v'nish'ala et fiha. And the $1 million question really of this parsha is, what are they asking her? Are they asking her whether she wants to go now, or are they asking her whether she wants to go at all? And it's a little bit of a machloket between the Mefarshim, because some say that when they said earlier, that they wouldn't have done that without her consent. But some say no, the fact that they verbally ask her in Pasuk Nun Zayin Nun Chet, and they ask her, Hatilchi im ha'ish hazeh, will you go with this man, not with this Eved? And she says, Elech, that perhaps that's the first she's hearing about it. And I want to suggest again a pshat that is not mine, and it is a pshat of Rav Shalom, who I've mentioned here before, because he just reads Tanakh in the most mechudash way, and then you can't unread his pshat, that he makes a remarkable suggestion here. He actually suggests, and it's a radical suggestion, but once you see it, it's hard to unsee, that who did Rivka think that she was actually marrying?
Eliezer? Did she think she
This
was marrying
ish.
Eliezer?
This ish.
This ish, yeah.
When it says, Vayishlechu, Vayikru l'Rivka vayamru eleha hatelchi im ha'ish hazeh v'tomer elech, this ish who's given you jewelry as a betrothal gift, will you go with him? And she said yes, that perhaps she really thought that she was marrying him. Perhaps, and it would make a lot of sense to say that they had to call her in because she wasn't in the room. Maybe she didn't hear the whole story about Eved Avraham. And if you notice up until now, every time that they are together, this man and Rivka, he's always the ish. She sees him as the ish. He's nobody's Eved. He's an ish. He's got the jewelry. He's got, and perhaps that's what she thought was going on. And the fact that he was coming on Avram's behalf doesn't contradict it. Perhaps he could be an Eved Avraham, and it would have been a great schus to marry somebody who was associated with Avram, who was part of his family, who had a connection to Hashem because of Avraham. But in her wildest dream, she didn't think that she was going to marry Avram's son, right? Because nowhere is there any indication that she knew that that's what was going on.
Is that why she falls off the camel?
Yes. And so there are two things that might really support this this approach. So Pasuk Samach Aleph is where the Ish and Eved language piece intersect, or really crashes, right? Vatako mifka v'narotaha vatirkavna ala gemalim vatelachna achrei ha'ish vayikach ha'eved et Rivka vayelech. Now that pasuk is redundant. It says that Rivka was placed upon the camels and went after the Ish, and the Eved took Rivka and went. That's saying the same thing twice, but it's from the two different perspectives. From her perspective, she was going with the Ish, perhaps to marry him. And from his perspective, the Eved, was taking Rivka back to marry Yitzchak, right? And in that one pasuk, which when you read it carefully, seems to be saying the same thing twice, but in one half he's called the Ish, and in one half he's called the Eved, really reflects their two perspectives and this massive miscommunication that has happened up until now. And now,
So in other words,
what?
Vayikach would be like likuchin?
He took her.
No, like likuchin from the marriage ceremony.
That would be an interesting diuk. I'm not sure. Like Kiddushin Vayikach? Maybe that would mess me up.
Well,
because
Aviva,
in that part, he's the Eved. He's taking her on behalf of Avram and Yitzchak. So, I don't know.
like, isn't it possible, I remember learning someplace, that a person can stand in for the groom?
Yes.
But
Which might be what's going on here. It might be based on this, that he was giving the jewelry, right, the kesef kiddushin, so to speak, on behalf of Avram, on behalf of Yitzchak. But that's not something that she would necessarily know. As long as she consents to accept the kiddushin, maybe she thought that she was accepting it from him.
But she would have to know who she was getting married to.
Yes, but she could have misunderstood it.
When he went through the entire story all over again of everything that happened, and he said he was Avram's servant, so why would there be a misunderstanding there?
Because it's not clear that she was there. They had to call her into the room afterwards.
But there'd been the whole meeting the night before when it says right before this part of calling her in, it says that they slept or something. I'm looking for it. It says that he came back.
No, he asked if there was a place to sleep, but I don't think that this is the next day. Oh, sorry, you're right. Let me find it.
And then he tells the whole story.
Yes, they slept, and then baboker vayomer shalchuni adoni. But again, so you're right. So it could be that at that point they need to call her in. But why do they need to ask her if she wants to go? Meaning, if it had already been decided that she'd go.
Because I think it was more the specific question about whether she's staying for the year or 10 months or not.
Right.
Okay, so and I accept that. And that's definitely a way to read this, and it's the way that generations of Mefarshim read it, and so I'm not suggesting that we need to throw that out. I am compelled, though, by the suggestion that she really didn't know, because it answers some of the other questions that have come up over the course of the parsha, and like Cookie said, she falls off the camel, because that's the point when she sees Yitzchak, and she realizes that's the one I'm marrying. That's the one for whom Avraham sent this man to find a wife, and it says it beautifully by which Chazal explained he was going to daven. She saw that that's what Yitzchak is about. Vateret Yitzchak vatipol me'al gamal. She falls off the camel, and then vatomer el ha'eved ha'ish halazeh ha'olech basada likratenu. That's the first time she calls him an Eved. I realize now that you're the Eved and he's the Ish. He's the one I'm supposed to marry. And then it all becomes clear to her. And then they fall in love and get married. And it actually says that at the end. It's a beautiful, happy ending to the story.
Is she?
But the whole time, the Eved, the Ish, was really true to representing Avram and didn't do anything to mislead. But it's a little even a bit humorous that in coming off as so mechubed and so with all the wealth and all the kavod of Avram and the close connection to Hashem and the nevuah, that Rivka could have realized that he was just the messenger, or perhaps could have really thought that this is a great catch, right? He's from Beit Avraham. He had nevuah from Hashem. He has a lot of wealth. And only when she realized, once they got home, towards the direction of Yitzchak's Oel, that Yitzchak is the one she's going to marry, she falls off the camel. She covers herself with the tza'if out of tzniut, out of embarrassment. and that the fact, I think that the idea that she sees Yitzchak in tefillah, right, that with the life that actually is going to, that she's actually starting, is not just about wealth, and is not just about the jewelry and the money and the camels, but it's based on this love for Yitzchak, this tefillah that he was in the midst of, and this connection to Avram's house and to Sarah's ohel that Yitzchak brings her into, and that's how their story starts. So take it or leave it. I'm presenting it here. I find the chat very compelling. I definitely hear the challenges and the questions.
And we shouldn't forget that Rivka also had Nevuah.
Yes.
And it would seem that she would know what was going on, and that she had a Meneket Devorah who would also know what was going on. I don't think she'd be in the dark.
No, I think that she kind of realizes once she sees Yitzchak, like once she realizes like, this is my destiny to be part of this family, and like really leaves the house of Lavan and Betuel behind, that's when, like, you know, she's out of the darkness. That's how I would read.
Wouldn't she have realized, wouldn't she have thought that if Eliezer was the one she was going to marry, why wouldn't they have gotten married already before they left?
Before they left
Her father's house.
because he still is associated with Avram in his house, meaning I think he would still want to go back. That's a good question. I'm not.
And
I don't
also,
know the definitive answer.
I'd have thought that Eliezer would have realized that she was a little confused.
Right, I don't know. You would think. You would think. Yeah, I'll show you. I have the text highlighted. If you just have a sense. This is the parshiya, like with no breaks. Here's what it looks like if you notice the avdo and the ish, and then he's Eved Avraham, and every time it says Adoni, he's underlined, and then the pasuk at the end where you have the ish and the Eved in the same pasuk, and then suddenly the new ish is Yitzchak. It's cool to map it out this way. It's cool to see how, what does the Torah seem to be trying to tell us here about either the nature of this individual, how he walked the line between Eved and Ish / Navi, how he was perceived by others versus how he perceived himself. I think there's a really deep message there as well, that you know, we can come off as put together and you know, put together and but really it's what's, you know, going on spiritually that's more important. And Rivka's really transitioned from the house of Betuel and Lavan, which we're going to be brought back to in a couple of parshiot, not for the good, into Avram's tent and Sarah's tent and Yitzchak's home, and how she sort of begins her transformation from the daughter of Betuel and the sister of Lavan to Rivka, of Rivka and Yitzchak, and their love and their ohel and their tefillot that become the theme of next week's parsha.
Aviva, I think it's very, I feel very optimistic about this important parsha dealing with shidduchim and lasuach basadeh. Maybe we should encourage our children to come to the parks to daven, like the ones who are davening at home.
Daven outside, find your shidduch.
Find your shidduch, right.
Maybe
There
we
you
should
go.
have it
It's
there.
a good Corona message for this parsha.
Well, they said that people who went to the Corona hotels over Pesach, shidduchim were made there.
I bet.
Yeah, they were.
Oh, sure.
Aviva?
Yeah, Tanya.
I had a question. I felt like when Rivka was being introduced to the readers, it was very similar in language to when we're introduced to Yitzchak. The whole lineage, the whole genealogy, to know 100% that he's Sarah's son, but he's Abraham's son as well. And then when you go to Rivka, also it's Betuel's daughter, but it's Lavan's sister. Like, I felt like the intros for the two children is exceptionally special, but very parallel. Like I haven't put them pasuk by pasuk, but it sounded integrally very parallel. And then on top of that, it's almost only when she sees Yitzchak that she knows he's Abraham's son. And we know the drash also that Yitzchak looked exactly like Abraham. So if her grandfather is Nahor and she grew up in his house, maybe there was some familial, representation also that Abraham and Yitzchak looked like her grandfather, meaning as soon as she saw him, everything clicked, everything changed. It's almost as soon as she saw him, Nevuah came into her, like she breathed.
Oh, you muted yourself in the middle there.
It wasn't me that time.
We missed the very last bit because you were on mute for the.
I said it was just very, very similar. And I thought maybe once she saw his face, that's when the Nevuah kicked in. When she goes into Sarah's tent, then she's complete. Maybe she didn't have Nevuah beforehand. Maybe she was raised in Lavan's house. She was raised in Bethuel's house. There's always trickery. So almost this deception of misunderstanding, it all becomes clear once she leaves his house.
Right.
But she's still trapped in misinterpretation and white
It's interesting.
lies
Yeah.
And that mindset, but it's only once she leaves and then everything becomes crystal clear. There is
Crystal
no
clear, but
trickery.
she can
There's
never
only
fully
emet.
escape, right? We hear that like when Rivka and Yitzchak daven side by side, so the tefillot of Yitzchak are accepted because he's the tzaddik ben tzaddik, not the tzaddik ben rasha. She can never totally cut herself off from that family, and that's also what happens in this week's parsha. We see Rivka like extracted, physically extracted from Bethuel and Lavan's house to be part of Avram, to enter Sarah's tent.
But she wanted to. She was the one who said, I'm going. However young she was, whether she was 3 or whether she was 14, she knew she was in the wrong place.
Exactly.
And that she wanted to go with this man who had some kind of spiritual effect around him. I don't know exactly what you want to call it. And she was going to where he came from. And I see her as a zchut of hers. She knew what she wanted. She was a teenager or she was young, but she did know. And she knew what was right and what was wrong from an early age.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, Edie.
Something Hillary said just clicked in my mind. I agree with her about Rivka, and we cannot minimize the fact that Rivka had this extremely close relationship with Devorah Menekes. I mean, Devorah must have talked a lot about the family and talked about midos, and already in Rivka's mind was an idea of what her sheifot should be, what she should be thinking of. I mean, we give Devorah a lot of respect in the Torah by mentioning, all of the Meforshim go crazy, like Ma Pitom, what's this Alon Bachut, and what's Devorah? That's one. Now I want to go back to something that Seema said that's very true. When you're talking about shidduchim was something that I was very successful in for a long time. Not so much anymore because I feel anyhow that to a certain extent, Facebook and a lot of technology have ruined things. But it's not enough to daven outside. I think you need to know about the person, the chesed that they're involved in. And I think we're so involved. What does he do? And how much money does he make? And is he funny? I think a person would do very, very well. That one of the top things should be, what kind of chesed is the person involved in?
Midot.
Absolutely. We're here all married for a very long time. So you're the youngster among us, Aviva, but if you find out that somebody's a really kind person and involved in chesed, you're doing pretty good.
True.
Listen, just a personal story.
I apologize. I need to sign off and bid you farewell. I have my next 11 o'clock engagement, but please continue. Please continue without me. It's a pleasure as always. Hillary, thank you for recording.